A Nintendo Direct just happened, and Square Enix showed up today. Romancing Saga, Final Fantasy Tactics, an entire new game with the Adventures of Elliot, the Millennium Tales, and Octopath Traveler 0, an entire new entry in Octopath Traveler, or is it? But is HD2D overdone? I don't really think so. And in today's video, I want to go over my excitement for 3 of these games: Tactics, Elliot, and Octopath, and defend their visual styles. Hello everyone, I am Jmulls, and let's get right into this, shall we?
Facing danger is what adventurers do.
Final Fantasy Tactics is one of those games that I always hear to be hyped up, but I never managed to play it myself, so I am looking forward to the Eliot Chronicles, the re-release of Final Fantasy Tactics with a bunch of new visuals, voice acting, and changes overall. Though there has been a bit of controversy surrounding this game because, to my knowledge, it's not adapting content from the War of the Lions version of the game. So the complaint people are laying at this game is that it's incomplete, and not bringing all the content Tactics used to have into the modern day. Well, I've never played Final Fantasy Tactics, so I'm not even entirely sure what is included in War of the Lions, or if I would enjoy it to begin with. But what I can say is that the look and the feel of the game itself, from the trailers we've gotten for the Eliot Chronicles, looks like it's a game that would be up my alley. I may not be that big of a fan of Final Fantasy XII, but the world of Eliot was one of the few positives that I had for the game, and Final Fantasy Tactics takes place in that same world, Eliot. One of my favorite raid series from Final Fantasy XIV are the Eliot raids, which are heavily inspired from Tactics. So to be able to see where all of that comes from, and the game that I've heard hyped up so many times over the years, I am looking forward to Final Fantasy Tactics. And I know one of the concerns for Tactics, the Eliot Chronicles, was whether or not they were going to have the old versions of the cutscenes, which were just the models, or the actual rendered cinematics. And in the trailer they showed off in the Direct, yeah, those looked like regular cutscenes, and they looked pretty cool to me. I'm not the biggest fan of the art style of Final Fantasy Tactics. I get it, it was a PS1 game. But even still, and looking at the cutscenes in the trailer, not my preferred art style, but I also don't mind the charm that it does have. And I think there is something to be said for trying to preserve the visual style of the original game. This is going to be a common theme I talk about in this video. A lot of people over the years have bemoaned the video game industry for going in a direction of hyper-realistic graphics, and that every game has to be this big blockbuster success with the most cutting-edge graphics possible. And in the pursuit of doing so, we get entries spaced out over many years, and we lose out on a bit of style and artistic variety when everyone's focused on being as realistic as humanly possible with the graphic styles. And I think it's fair to say that Final Fantasy Tactics, the Eliot Chronicles, does look unique. So whether or not the art style necessarily appeals to me or to you, I think there is something to be said about that. It's nice Square Enix isn't only focused on making games that are as big budget as, say, like Final Fantasy 16. I like the fact that there is room for these smaller entries. Speaking of, let's move on to a game that really surprised me by how much it's appealing to me. Elliot?
Facing danger is what adventurers do.
The Adventures of Elliot, the Millennium Tales, is an entire new game from Square, and I believe it's also a new IP, and it's developed by Team Asano, and you can probably tell because it's HD2D. And I think this game looks really neat and cool. I like it. The fact that it's an action RPG with the HD2D graphics seems like a really cool change of pace to me. I love the overall vibe that it has. It's just something about Square Enix RPGs where you're just a dude with a fairy companion, or just RPGs overall. You know, I'm starting to notice a lot of my favorite games have that trend to the Metaphor Fantasio, Bravely Default, Majora's Mask. Do we want to count Spyro in that? I digress. The Adventures of Elliot looks really interesting to me. I like the gameplay that they showed. I like the idea that you can move the fairy around and then teleport to them. I like the look of the actual combat in the game as well. It looks rather simple, but satisfying at the same time. I think Elliot himself looks really dang cool, and the overall premise for this game just really appeals to me. In certain ways, it does feel as if they're trying to capture the vibe of, like, both Chrono Trigger, but also Secret of Mana. manner is an interesting blend, and it seems that the name of the game will be very literal. Square Enix has an entire blog post detailing the games they talked about at the Nintendo Direct, and in the blurb for The Adventures of Elliot, it says, developed by Team Asano, this exciting new game puts you in the red hat of Elliot, a skilled adventurer who embarks on a mission to explore some newly discovered ruins. Before long, he's embroiled in a thrilling journey, will echo across time and space. Probably should have proofread this one a little bit more. As Elliot, you'll explore a beautiful and expansive world, full of enemies to defeat, in crunchy, action-packed combat, deadly caves and ruins to explore, and secrets aplenty to uncover. Elliot can use 7 different weapon types, from simple swords for close-range attacks to sickle and chains to bring foes in close. Yeah, the actual combat and gameplay remind me a lot of 2D Zelda games, where you acquire all the tools throughout the game and you can utilize them to your own advantage in various scenarios. Looks sick to me. You're accompanied on your journey by Faye, a fairy whose abilities are of great use in and out of battle. Faye's powers will let you warp short distances, sprint around the world at super speed, and more. And I think Square Enix was really smart with this one, and to make sure that this game wouldn't be immediately forgotten because it's not coming out till 2026, put out a trailer and also a demo for this game. Let people get their hands on it and try it for themselves, and that's what I'm going to do later today on stream. I'm definitely playing the demo for this game because it looked really intriguing to me. I think the game looked like a ton of fun, and I think it's an interesting use of the HD2D art style. I don't think there's anything wrong with Square Enix having a clear visual identity for a lot of their smaller titles, and I think a lot when it comes to modern internet and a lot of the modern reactions we see to a lot of these big game shows is that if it's not an absolute big heavy hitter, people will just say it's slop or trash and just move on and not even give it the time of day. And granted, I don't think Square Enix does the best job marketing or packaging a lot of these smaller titles. I mean, you have that big meme going around, and it has gone around for the longest time, where a lot of the logos are just essentially the same thing, you just replace the words. And when you combine an extremely similar art style alongside that packaging, and you put out a lot of these games, of course some people are going to look at that and say, oh, these are just sloppy, just trying to shovel them out the door. Even if the individual entries are really good, you're not doing these games any favors by marketing and packaging them like this. But having said that, when you actually watch the gameplay and you actually watch the trailer, it looks really dang cool and interesting, and I'm on board with it. And now for the heavy hitter, and the one that I think may be a sign of things to come, more than you think, and possibly even for Nier. Let's talk Octopath.
Facing danger is what adventurers do.
The final game that was showcased at the Nintendo Direct, the partner showcase, was a new entry in Octopath Traveler, Octopath Traveler 0. But some of you may have realized there's a lot of connections here to another game, Octopath Traveler Champions of the Continent. Well, what the heck is that? It's the mobile game, and before you sigh and go, oh god, we're doing this again, aren't we? I think what they're doing here is rather interesting, and as a Nier fan, I'm all ears on this concept. Let me explain. So, Square Enix also has an article just for Octopath Traveler 0, and there's an entire section on how the game relates to Octopath Traveler Champions of the Continent. Let's read it now. If you played the mobile title, Octopath Traveler Champions of the Continent, the game's setup may sound a little familiar. That's because Octopath Traveler 0 is inspired by story elements and gameplay ideas from that game. This new entry in the Octopath Traveler series has been designed as a full-fledged console and PC RPG. It takes the acclaimed story from the mobile release, but reworks it to add new story content and streamlines the overall story for a more compelling experience. It features a new script with entirely new narrative elements, including new backstories for playable characters, as well as full voice acting that brings the many twists and turns home more effectively. Similarly, Octopath Traveler Champion of the Continent featured battles with 8 character parties. Octopath Traveler 0 takes that idea and refines it to create even more strategically satisfying skirmishes. It also brings entirely new features such as the town building to restore your hometown, a substantial new element to the game that's fun and rewarding in equal measure. In short, it's the best of both worlds. The amazing story and ideas of the mobile release combined with the gameplay and design that fans have come to love from the console and PC games. It doesn't matter whether you've played Champions of the Continent or not, you're getting a new experience either way. So what they're doing is they're taking the story and the plot from the mobile game and reworking it to work as a regular PC and console RPG. Not to mention all the various twists this game has to the Octopath Traveler formula, coming from Octopath Traveler 1 and 2, or at least 1 in my experience, that I think are rather intriguing, like being able to make your own character, and that character having a story, which could possibly remedy my biggest issue that I've always had with Octopath Traveler, and that is the storytelling of the series, being you go from origin story to origin story to origin story, and for me personally, I get invested in one character's story, and they have to be sidelined immediately as I go find another character to engage in their origin story. Maybe this game can alleviate that to some degree. I think what's going on in the game looks rather interesting, and the idea of being able to rebuild your hometown is cool. Granted, it's not the only Square Enix RPG that came out this year that lets you do that. Hi, Bravely Default, even though, that one didn't come out this year, if you want to go back to the 3DS version. It's just really funny how this is starting to become a bit of a trend for Square Enix, but besides that, I think the game itself looks rather interesting and cool. I like the gameplay of Octopath Traveler. I think it has really satisfying combat and gameplay. I like the fact that each of the characters has a unique way to interface with the world, whether that is acquiring more knowledge from various characters, recruiting random NPCs so you can use them in combat, challenging them to a duel. It's a cool way the game is able to give you a feeling of progression throughout the game, even outside of combat. And I think Octopath Traveler 0 looks really cool to me. But as someone who loves Nier and never managed to actually make my way through Nier Reincarnation because I thought the gameplay was absolutely god-awful, it has always upset me that Nier 3 is technically a discontinued and offline gacha mobile game with Nier Reincarnation, which apparently has a really cool and compelling story. I've played a little bit of it, I love the visuals and I love the story there of what I've played, and I love the music. I just couldn't get past it being a mobile game and the gameplay being that dull and uninteresting to me. They did not talk about this, but the fact they're willing to do something like this for Octopath Traveler, where you take the mobile game and you take that story and you retool it and you rewrite it to work as a regular RPG, the fact that Square Enix is willing to do that for Octopath Traveler makes me hopeful that maybe we can see the same love and attention done for Nier Reincarnation and you make a regular RPG version of that story. Because I would love to be able to play that with gameplay I can actually, tolerate. And I truly do hope that is something that is in the cards. And maybe Octopath Traveler Champions of the Continent is being used as a prototype with Octopath Traveler 0 to see if they can get it to work and if people actually like it. I think it's an interesting idea.
Facing danger is what adventurers do.
So let's talk about the HD2D situation, because it seems like most of the reactions I'm seeing online are people just saying, oh, how could they end this direct with just 2 Square Enix games? How could they do it with 2 HD2D games? This looks like slop. What are we doing? It's a sentiment I think we're seeing a lot more and more when it comes to these big gaming showcases, where it's just like, if they don't have some massive big budget game, or they don't have a game that appeals to them specifically, people will just write off a show and say it's uninteresting and not cool, or that everything else is just slop, who would play this, and stuff like that. I really don't like this mindset. I don't like this mindset that everything has to be some big blockbuster, or from some giant series that's already established, or with really high-end graphics, and that anything that's not that is just shovelware or slop. I think a lot of people go into these gaming showcases expecting that everything there has to appeal to them specifically, and these showcases are trying to show off multiple different things. Not everything's going to appeal to you, and not every show is going to have something that appeals to you. But I like seeing a bunch of different games and seeing where the industry's at overall and where's it going. And I think the games that Square Enix showed off look rather cool. Will they appeal to everyone? No, but they appeal to me to some degree. I think the Adventures of Elliot most of all, but I remember in the early and mid 2010s when one of the biggest complaints a lot of people had was that every game tried to look hyper-realistic or just another shade of brown, and that we were losing out on the art of the small or medium-sized game, and everything was trying to go in the direction of being some big blockbuster. And we still have that problem to some degree nowadays, but I do like the fact that we're seeing more and more of these games that are small smaller scale. They're not trying to have the budget of like a massive RPG like Final Fantasy 16 or anything like that. They have scope and a vision, and you know what? I appreciate that. I didn't think I was going to like how Bravely Default looked and felt, and then I played it and it clicked with me. I'm like, oh, you know what? I really like this. I like the size of this game. I like the scope of it. I don't need, and I don't even think I want it to be any bigger high-end. And I think that's how I feel when it comes to games like The Adventures of Elliot or Octopath Traveler. I have my issues with games like Octopath Traveler, sure. I have my issues with every game. But there's undeniable charm, in my opinion, when it comes to these experiences. And I like the fact that Square Enix has an art style all of their own for these smaller and medium-tier games with HD2D. I think it's a cool way to harken back to the past of RPGs while still having them look visually impressive, and I think they do look visually impressive to me. I like how a lot of these games look, and am I that big of a fan of, say, pixel art characters? Not particularly, but if the writing and the gameplay is good enough, I can look past it. Some people can't, and that's entirely their prerogative, right? We all have our own different tastes and preferences. Now, I'm just saying, I don't want everything to be to the scale that Kingdom Hearts 4 is going to be, and I understand that a lot of people, myself included, are waiting for games like Dragon Quest 12 and others for games like Kingdom Hearts 4, or something like a Final Fantasy IX remake. I don't want Square Enix or any of these big companies to be only focused on one or two series. I like having that variety. I like having, especially for a company of Square Enix's size, I like having these smaller games. Heck, one of the games I want an HD2D remake of the most is Xenogears, which is also a Square Enix game. I want to see them do that. I am actively rooting for that game to come back as HD2D. If they want to go high-end with it, sure, but I would be perfectly satisfied with that game coming back in any shape or form. I think what Square Enix needs to do, though, is fix the way they package and market these games. Because of course you can get the online sentiment from a lot of people that, oh, these are just slop RPGs hot off the presses being churned out to meet like some quota or something. I think when you look at these games for more than like 5 seconds, you can see a lot of visual differences between them, even in the HD2D style, but they do look similar because it's a similar art style. That's kind of the point of having a similar visual identity. You can look at a game and go, oh, that's a Square Enix game. But when a lot of the logos are just kind of lacking in life and variety and color, and they just look so churned out, I think that does add up over time to create this sentiment that we're seeing nowadays. Look at how timeless a lot of the logos for like the Final Fantasy games are. You still see people like make fan art of various games as if they had Final Fantasy based logos. I don't see why games like Octopath or games like The Adventures of Elliot can't have logos that have that life, that variety, that color, that imagination in them. Because when you market a game, oh, this is our B team, or like this is like not our best, and you churn that out over and over and over again, eventually that feeling and sentiment will just sink in for a lot of people, and they'll just write off whatever you put out and group them all together in some amorphous blob.
Facing danger is what adventurers do.
Square Enix is in this weird spot right now, where it feels as if they don't announce anything related to Kingdom Hearts 4, Dragon Quest 12, or Final Fantasy IX Remake, people will just largely write it off because a lot of people are super invested and hyper-focused and fixated on those things right now. And they've been largely absent outside of like the occasional Twitter post. And when it comes to Final Fantasy IX Remake, yeah, Square Enix just like kind of never talked about that. It's just we really assume it's happening. But I will say these recent games that Square Enix are putting out, stuff like Bravely Default, games that are upcoming like The Adventures of Elliot or Octopath Traveler 0. These games look cool to me. I like the looks of them. I want to play Final Fantasy Tactics. Going into a game like Bravely Default, I would never have expected for that world to end up being one of my favorite worlds in a JRPG I've ever played. I'm not even at like the big points in that game, I believe, yet. A lot of these games that are smaller scope, smaller scale, that may not have the most high-end graphics out there, they can have amazing characters, great gameplay, a focused vision, and a great sense of identity. They know what they are, they know what they're trying to set out to be, and they focus on doing that. And I think a game like Bravely Default, that I missed out on the 3DS because I wasn't that big on the 3DS, playing on the Switch too, fell in love with that game. And I want to keep playing that game even when I'm not playing it currently. So yes, I'm looking forward to things like Final Fantasy Tactics. I wish it had all the content from things like War of the Lions, even though I don't know what that content is, just based on principle, I wish it had it. When it comes to a game like The Adventures of Elliot, I love that concept. I love love that vibe. I think it looks super interesting to me. I want to play that game, and I'm going to on stream later today with the demo. When it comes to Octopath Traveler 0, yeah, I've had issue getting into Octopath Traveler because of the storytelling inherent to that series, but I have recently started playing that game again off stream, and I love the world, I love the story when I'm experiencing it, and I love the gameplay, and I love the music, and I love the visuals. I don't think everything needs to be super high-end, or massive budget, or giant in scope. I like the fact that Square Enix wants these games to have a vision, to feel and look like a Square Enix RPG. It's just, I think they need to do a better job of marketing and a better job of packaging these games, so they don't feel as if they all came off the same production line. Like in that one episode of SpongeBob when SpongeBob battled King Neptune in the Krabby Patty off. You don't want your games to feel like King Neptune's Krabby Patties. You want them to feel like SpongeBob's. And when you actually play them, like a game like Bravely Default, they do feel like SpongeBob's, but they have the presentation of King Neptune's. That's the issue I think Square Enix needs to address going forward. But here's where you come in. Leave a comment down below with your thoughts, your opinions on the smaller scale RPGs from Square Enix, or the HD2D art style. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you agree with me, or do you disagree with me? I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions and hear your perspectives. And are you looking forward to any of the games they announced today? And if you want to check out my coverage for the Adventures of Elliot when I play it on stream, and for future Square Enix news and games, you should leave a like and subscribe. Follow me on TikTok, Twitch, and Twitter, Jmulls G, and I have a Discord in the description down below. And guys, I got a Steam Deck OLED, and if you want to find out my first impressions with that piece of kit, you should check out this video right here. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again!